Jason Pierre-Paul officially says goodbye to Tampa. We go over some notes from day one of Bucs training camp. I give my thoughts on Julio Jones, and we put this Leonard Fournette foolishness to bed. Let's go.
You are Locked On Buccaneers, your daily Tampa Bay Buccaneers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, Bucs Nation? Welcome to the Locked On Bucs Podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We are your daily podcast covering the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, and we are free and available on all platforms, including YouTube. And we thank you for making us your first listen or view of the day. I am David Harrison, covering your Tampa Bay Buccaneers for Sports Illustrated's BucsGameDay.com. My co-host James Yarcho is off for this episode, but you can find him over at SB Nation's BucsNation.com, where he is the deputy editor and, of course, writing plenty of content himself. Also, if you're a Bengals fan, maybe you're a dual fan household or a person who likes multiple teams, you can also check out James Yarcho's writing covering the Cincinnati Bengals now at allbengals.com. Again, part of Sports Illustrated's family of sites. When we aren't here or any of those other places, you can find us on Twitter at JYarcho_Bucs and at DHarrison82. The show is at Locked On Bucs. We thank you again for making us your first listen or your first view of the day. Defensive end Jason Pierre-Paul. We have all basically been under the understanding that he was not going to be returning for the 2022 NFL season. But JPP himself, on the day that training camp began for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, he went ahead and made an Instagram post, essentially officially saying goodbye to the organization and to Tampa, posting a picture on his Instagram page. I am Jason Pierre-Paul. Again, if you want to follow him over there, that is verified. And a very brief message, just basically saying, gave the city of Tampa 4 great years, forever blessed, 90 power circle. A picture coming from the Super Bowl there. Again, if you're on YouTube, you can see it on the screen. If not, you can either go to YouTube and find it, or you can go to I am Jason Pierre-Paul on his own Instagram page and see that as well. So Jason Pierre-Paul officially, as official as he can get, I guess, departing from the Tampa Bay Buccaneers organization and giving his thanks for the 4 seasons that he was able to play with the team. And unfortunately, 2021 just didn't go really kind of how he wanted to go, how the team wanted to go. I remember at one point prior to the season, Jason had said that he felt the healthiest he'd felt in a very long time. Unfortunately, he goes on to play 12 games. Of course, before all that happened, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers used their first-round draft pick in 2021 to take Joe Tryon-Shoyinka, the pass rusher out of the Washington Huskies program, and just because he was going to get on the field, he's a first-round draft pick, he's going to get some snaps, but also because of some of the injuries and the health issues experienced by JPP, JTS, Joe Tryon-Shoyinka, really flashed his potential during the season at times, and it basically became more and more clear as the year went on that the best likely move entering this 2022 offseason for the Buccaneers was probably going to be to let JPP walk and give Joe Tryon-Shoyinka his crack at being that full-time starter opposite of Shaquille Barrett, and then using those resources, that money that saves them, to go out and get guys like Akeem Hicks, trying to sign Rob Gronkowski, and then, of course, eventually bringing in Kyle Rudolph, the veteran tight end, to play for the team. But JPP, again, 4 years with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers after being traded in 2018 from the New York Giants, along with a 2018 4th-round pick. The Bucs received JPP in a 2018 4th-round pick from the Giants in exchange for a 3rd and 4th-round pick from the same draft in 2018 from the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And honestly, guys, going through the history of this and looking at kind of what's transpired since, this may be Jason Licht's greatest draft success when it all boils down to it. This is the 3rd and 4th-round pick that Jason sent to the Giants in exchange for JPP and a 4th-round pick. With those 3rd and 4th-round picks, the Giants got defensive lineman B.J. Hill, and they got quarterback Kyle Lauletta. The Buccaneers took Jason Pierre-Paul, obviously, and then they took that 4th-round pick they got from the Giants, and they packaged it with other capital, moved up with the Minnesota Vikings, and they selected guard Alex Cappa, who, by the way, because of his deal with the Cincinnati Bengals, may very well help net them a compensatory pick in. Jordan Whitehead's going to compute into that. So is Alex Cappa, but then Akeem Hicks also does as well. So we'll see. I'm not a comp pick expert, so I can't tell you exactly how that's going to work out. But Alex Cappa, not only do the Buccaneers get him, but because he signs with the Cincinnati Bengals, they actually may end up getting a compensatory pick for losing Alex Cappa next year, which was just it's basically a rebates. Call it a rebates on the players. So the Buccaneers, again, in exchange for a 2018 third and fourth round pick, they get Jason Pierre-Paul, they get Alex Cappa, and they may actually get a 2023 NFL draft pick on top of it as well. Meanwhile, Lauletta spends 2018 with the New York Giants. He went 0 for 5 in 2 games and is no longer in the National Football League. In fact, most recently playing for the USFL's New Jersey Generals. Hill, by the way, spent 3 years with the Giants, 5.5 sacks his first season, which is great, but only 2 sacks over the next 2 seasons, 7.5 sacks total over 3 years before being traded to the Cincinnati Bengals, where he gave them 5.5 sacks. So Cincinnati, you're probably going to get 1 sack this year from BJ Hill. Just playing history here. Interestingly enough, Alex Cappa, now a teammate of BJ Hill. So both of these guys intertangled in this Jason Pierre-Paul trade from 2018. Now they are teammates working together in Cincinnati. Meanwhile, again, the Bucs get 2 eventual contributors to a Super Bowl winning roster, and JPP gave them nearly 5 times the sacks that Hill gave the Giants, while Kappa started 13 games for the Bucs in 2019, and then every single regular season game in 2020 and 2021. Unfortunately, did get banged up in the 2020 playoffs, ended up missing the Super Bowl. But either way, guys, I think we can say that Jason Licht and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers won that trade with the New York Giants. So despite his relatively short stay with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers franchise, again, 4 years, JPP ranks 9th all-time in franchise history in sacks, 5th all-time in hits on the quarterback. And, that's really not tracked throughout all of history, so take that with a grain of salt. And of all the players, top 10 in franchise history in sacks, only JPP and Shaquille Barrett are in the top 10 and have played for the Buccaneers 4 or fewer years. Every other person in the top 10 franchise history in sacks was or has been with the team at least 5 years, if not more. So a great contribution from Jason Pierre-Paul since he was brought over from the New York Giants to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Great trade by Jason Licht. Again, possibly, arguably, Jason Licht's best draft success story, considering that you get JPP, you get Alex Cappa, who ends up being a starting guard on your team for multiple years. Both help you win a Super Bowl, and you might actually get a draft pick out of Alex Cappa leaving here in about a year. So great story there, but obviously I feel like I speak on James' behalf, and I think most of Bucs Nation agrees. A lot of gratitude for what Jason Pierre-Paul did, even as excited as we are to see what Joe Tryon-Shoyinka can do with his career, getting to go to that next step and becoming a starter. So best of luck to JPP. I know he's still working out. I think he's still looking for a team. So best of luck to him as long as he doesn't join the New Orleans Saints. Moving forward, we're going to get some notes and some news from training camp from some people who were on ground. I'm going to share my thoughts on Julio Jones, and we're going to put this Leonard Fournette foolishness to bed all for once, and we're going to do so thanks to our friends over at Built.com. And if you haven't tried Built Bar Puffs yet, you are depriving yourself of one of life's greatest joys. And guys, that's in the script. I got to tell you, I actually believe it. Some of these things, the Mud Pie Built Puff is an amazing, amazing thing. And guess what? There's a new flavor. You ready for this one? Delicious, indulgent cookie dough covered in chocolate. That's right. That's what Built has done. So cookie dough chunk puffs have a light and chewy texture. Real cookie dough chunks are in this thing. And of course, they're covered in 100% real chocolate. Well, the chunks are on top of it, and then they're all covered in 100% real chocolate. All the joys of eating cookie dough without the hassle of making it. Plus, it's healthy for you. Cookie dough chunk puffs are only 160 calories, and they have 15 grams of protein. So run to Built.com to snag a box for you and the family. It will be a perfect treat, or you can find a really good hiding place and just hoard them for yourselves. Of course, if you're watching or listening, you're most likely doing so on a device that you can go to Built.com on, so you don't need to run anywhere. Just pull out your phone or your computer, head to Built.com. Like all Built bars, the new cookie dough chunk puff is covered in 100% real chocolate, making them tasty, but also keeping them healthy. All Built products are made with collagen protein, which your body absorbs more efficiently and provides tons of health benefits to you. Eat something that tastes good and is good for you. You're going to love the cookie dough chunk puff. So ditch the calories, fat, and sugar. Grab yourself a Built bar. Go to Built.com. Use the promo code LOCK15. You get 15% off that order or any order. Again, that's promo code LOCK15 at Built.com. Thanks again, everybody, for making the Locked On Bucs podcast your first listen or your first view every single day. Training camp is underway at One Buck, or the Advent Health Training Center in Tampa, Florida. And while James and I are not there, we will be there for Dolphins week. So just a couple weeks away, he and I will meet in Tampa, Florida. Meet for the first time, actually, since 2019. It's been a minute. COVID and my retirement and just lots of things getting in the way. But we will be back on ground. We will be there for the duration of Dolphins week. I will be staying in Tampa to cover the preseason game, which could or could not be somewhat exciting. Hopefully get a lot of Kyle Trask. That's really what I'm hoping to get out of is a lot of Kyle Trask. But we, like you, right now have to rely on the good people on the ground. BucsGameDay.com, the group that I work with there at Sports Illustrated, will have some people on the ground throughout camp as well. But of course, friends of the show are there as well. Bucs editor and senior writer Scott Smith, The Athletic's Greg Auman, the godfather of the Locked On Bucs podcast, along with all the good people over at Pewter Report, of course, among those on hand at Buccaneers training camp. So let's look at some comments and some news and some notes from some of those that were on ground. We'll start with Scott Smith. Start with Team Media at Scott S. Bucks on Twitter. If you're not already following him, make sure you do. Tweeting, quote, "First full team drill of the first practice of training camp is underway. Aaron Stinney got the first snaps at left guard as he seeks to replace Ali Marpet. Will be battling Luke Gedeke, among others," end quote. So important information here, something that we've been talking about. And if you go back to James and I are doing our 53-man roster projections and Evan dropping his thoughts on our 53-man roster projections. Again, I kind of did mine and James kind of followed suit with projecting not just who's going to make the roster, but who is going to be on the starting units, who's going to be depth, right? We both had Shaq Mason as one of the starting guards. And again, right guard for most of the time of the New England Patriots. So you figure that's where he's going to come in. But then you have Aaron Stinney and then Luke Gedeke also battling it out for that left guard spot. I did predict that Aaron Stinney would be the starting left guard, that Luke Gedeke might give him a run for his money. And you know what I mean? But at some point in the season, probably not in the season, honestly, I think the Buccaneers, whoever they decide to be the starter week one, probably want to try to keep that going, minus injuries, of course, always a thing. But what's interesting here is where Scott writes, among others, because that brings up Carmen Vitale, now of the Draft Network, no longer of the Buccaneers, came on this show recently, talked about, among other players, Robert Hainsey. And James, that's one of his favorite players this year, a guy to watch at training camp, also one of her favorite players, because she's been kind of making the rounds, training with some offensive linemen, going through some seminars, stuff like that. And she really likes the work that Robert is doing. Again, he played tackle in Notre Dame. They brought him in, started moving him inside the guard. Then they wanted to move him to center. Now he's also cross-training again to be a guard. So definitely a guy in Robert Hainsey worth keeping an eye on, as is my guy, should be all of our guy, but my guy, Brashad Perryman, the veteran wide receiver. Scott also tweeting at one point, quote, "Wide receiver Brashad Perryman with the first huge play of camp during a blitz period, adjusts deep down the middle to slip between two defenders and catch it clean, then sprint to the end zone," end quote. Tampa Bay Buccaneers social account, shout out to Jill Beckman, actually tweeted out a video of that pass. Tom Brady dropping back in the pocket, clean, nice protection. No defender is going to dare get next to number 12 in drills like this one right now, guys. But staying tall in the pocket, delivers a very clean ball to Brashad Perryman, and you see nobody's going to catch him after that point. So look, if you haven't seen the video, again, go to the Bucs social media account, check that out. It's a great video. But it makes me incredibly happy because Brashad Perryman is on my initial 53-man roster projection, but he's not on James Yarcho. So early lead to me, 1-0 David Harrison over James Yarcho. Brashad Perryman, guys, is making this roster. New Bucs staff writer Brianna Dix, at Brianna Dix, that's BriannaDix, NFL, Brianna Dix, NFL on Twitter. Quote, "Rachaad White, quick post cut showcasing agility." And you know I love this, not just because of the Arizona State ties, but because, again, Rachaad White projected to be on my 53-man roster. I think projected to be on everybody's 53-man roster. But I listed him as my number 2 running back behind Leonard Fournette, ahead of Giovanni Bernard. Now, granted, Gio's going to have his packages and all that stuff that he goes in for. But really love seeing that Rachaad White not only showcasing his agility, already kind of showcased a little bit of his ball carrying skills, but talking about doing it as a route runner, potentially doing this thing, connecting with his quarterbacks early on in training camp. Brianna also shared that Julio Jones was feeling 100% healthy. I know a lot of people did, but the first one I saw was Brianna, so I'm going to give her the credit here on this episode. 100% healthy and does not have any lingering health issues, which is amazing considering that Jones has played just 19 games in the past 2 seasons combined, which, by the way, 4 more than Saquon Barkley. An honorable mention, top 10 running back over Leonard Fournette has played in the same stretch. I'm just saying. Speaking of Julio Jones joins the roster. Big news, huge news. Evan Klosky of WTSP 10 Tampa Bay, your CBS affiliate down there in Tampa, joined James Yarcho on our Wednesday episode. Make sure you check that out. They went deep into Julio, what Julio brings, potentially what he can add to the team. You know, Tom Brady kind of recruiting him and what it means for the Bucs depth chart. Great episode, great in-depth conversation. I'm going to give my take here. It's not going to take quite as long because I don't want to rehash a whole lot, but basically I want to talk about how this impacts the depth chart, right? So in our 53-man roster projections, I had 7 wide receivers making the initial 53-man roster. I'm sticking with 7. I don't think this adds a receiver, and I certainly don't think it takes one away. So really what's happening is Julio is making this 53-man roster in one of the 7 spots, and he's actually pushing another guy off of this list. Now, in my original 53-man roster, I had Jalen Dart and Cyril Grayson Jr. both making the 53. Tyler Johnson was the guy that I left off. Now, James had Tyler Johnson on, and I want to say it's Cyril Grayson, or he had Jalen Dart, and maybe both of those guys off. I'm not sure off the top of my head. He can tell us that on the next episode. But in this scenario, as it stands right now, and again, we're not pre-training camp anymore, right? But we're like first day of training camp, 53-man roster projection adjustment, right? Look, Mike Evans, Chris Godwin, Russell Gage, they've all got roster spots. So that's 3 of the 7. Julio Jones, you assume is going to get a roster spot. That's 4 of the 7. So you only got room for 3 more guys. And the guys you have fighting for those 3 more spots, and that's max. I mean, the Buccaneers, they take 4 running backs. They keep 3 or 4 tight ends. You know what I mean? If they like, how many offensive linemen do they want? They may have to keep 6 wide receivers at first. So we'll see. But if they go with 7, like I did, you have 3 guys or 3 spots, and you've got 5 guys fighting for those spots. You got Scotty Miller, Brashad Perryman, Jalen Dart, and Cyril Grayson Jr. and Tyler Johnson. Now, here's how I look at this, because I've seen some social media traffic. Some people think Scotty Miller maybe is the guy out. But when you look at this, right, Russell Gage, he's got that quick speed or whatever. He doesn't have the same downfield speed. I'm not saying he's slow. Don't get crazy. I'm not saying he's slow, but I'm just saying I think Russell Gage is viewed more as a short field, quick intermediate route type of guy, quick feet in the short area than Scotty Miller is with that long speed. I look at Scotty Miller and Cyril Grayson kind of very similar with that track speed type of thing going on. Brashad Perryman brings a little bit of size. He brings a little bit of speed. Jalen Darden has the return stuff ahead of him. Tyler Johnson, again, he's already my guy off the roster. When I look at Julio Jones, just think Julio Jones basically is either on par or better than Tyler Johnson is this year in 2022. And he's more experienced than a veteran wide receiver. And if he is truly completely healthy, that's even better. So really, for me, it boils down to Scotty Miller, Brashad Perryman, Jalen Dart, and Cyril Grayson Jr. One of those 4 guys is getting cut. And if it's me, it's Cyril Grayson Jr. I love what the guy has done. And if the post-COVID practice squad opportunities allow the Buccaneers to keep him over on the practice squad, I would love to see that happen. But again, until someone emerges to take those return duties away from Jalen Darden, I just don't see how you can cut Jalen Darden at this point in time. Now, Cyril Grayson maybe steps up and becomes that return specialist. Then I think you see Cyril Grayson, Brashad Perryman, Scotty Miller round out the rest of that depth chart. So that's how I think Julio Jones' impact really impacts the other wide receivers. And then, of course, those guys like Tyler Johnson, you're probably looking at a trade. You're probably going to send him elsewhere, maybe for a 7th or 6th round draft pick. So that's how I think. That's what I think about Julio. We'll see how it actually pans out. Can't wait to go down there. I mean, I'm going to see Tom Brady, Julio Jones, Leonard Fournette, Levante David, Mike Evans, Chris. I mean, it's a crazy, crazy world we are living in right now, Bucs Nation, and we're not done yet because some of the craziness was surrounding Leonard Fournette as we approach training camp. We're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about the resolution to it, and then hopefully we're never going to talk about it again on the Locked On Bucs podcast. Final segment on the Locked On Bucs podcast. The rumors of Leonard Fournette's demise were vastly exaggerated as the running back reported to training camp fit and ready to go, according to Buccaneers.com senior writer and editor Scott Smith, who tweeted, quote, Todd Bowles said Leonard Fournette looked good today, ran great in the conditioning test Tuesday, and looked fast and explosive in practice, end quote. Let's read that again. Quote, Todd Bowles said Leonard Fournette looked good today, ran great in the conditioning test Tuesday, and looked fast and explosive in practice, End quote. So I wasn't on the episode following Rick Stroud or the publishing of the podcast where Rick Stroud of the Tampa Bay Times revealed on a podcast that an unnamed Bucs coach was unhappy about Leonard Fournette's weight going back to the mandatory minicamp. So that was an episode with James, and I believe Evan was on that episode as well. And I'll be honest with you guys, I was out. I got asked by somebody, you hear about this Fournette stuff? And I said, yeah, we heard about it. That was from the minicamp. This podcast episode aired July 15th. Now, I don't know when it was recorded. It doesn't really matter. It aired July 15th. When Fournette reported to mandatory minicamp and was overweight, he was visibly overweight. He admitted to it. Like he said, yeah, I got it. Don't worry about it. We said then, James and I, we addressed it then in early June at the mandatory minicamp that we were not concerned about Leonard Fournette getting to or under his fighting weight. That was in early June. This is late July. All right. Then the report comes, the podcast comes out mid-July, but then it bleeds into late July. And everybody for the last 2 weeks or last week and a half is talking about Leonard Fournette's overweight. Leonard Fournette is fat. His coaches are unhappy with him. He's spoiled, quote unquote, or he's lazy, quote unquote. And the real, quote unquote, Leonard Fournette is now coming out after he got his ring and his 3-year deal with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. 6 weeks, ladies and gentlemen, 6 weeks had elapsed from the time that Leonard Fournette showed up to minicamp, and we poked fun as well. Leonard Fournette poked fun at himself a little bit. 6 weeks had passed from Leonard Fournette showing up to minicamp. And if you remember, went through the entire minicamp with a hoodie on to sweat extra, and that's what he said. I'm sweating it out, getting a head start on getting this weight shed. He acknowledged it. And then the podcast airs. 6 weeks had gone by. And look, credit to Rick Stroud. I don't want this to be taken misconstrued. I'm not bagging on Rick Stroud here, okay? Rick Stroud probably said it, just kind of a throwaway line, like, oh, yeah, by the way, I didn't listen to the episode, okay? But I don't imagine Rick Stroud thought this was going to turn into some dramatic realization here. 6 weeks ago by, Rick Stroud even tweeted, guys, 6 weeks has happened since this whole thing has gone down. It was literally, I mean, it was a lot to do without nothing. James and Evan talked about it just because, again, it was in the stratosphere, needed to be talked about. But it needs to be put down. So hopefully that's what we're doing right here. Look, media literacy, right? I always use polls as an example. You see someone who's like, 86% of Americans think that, I don't know, strawberries should now be considered vegetables. People are like, oh man, 86%, that's a crazy amount of Americans who think that strawberries should be vegetables. And then you look into the data and you look into the fine print and it says, oh, this poll was conducted. They asked 2,000 people in, I don't know, Tampa, Florida. And okay, you might sit there and say like, well, 2,000 people is still a lot of people, David. Yeah, I got that. That's roughly 0.005% of the population of the city of Tampa. So think about that. The headline is 86% of Americans think that strawberries should be vegetables. Well, the 86% of the Americans they polled is 2,000 Americans, and that 2,000 Americans represents less than 1% of the city of Tampa alone. Like, forget the rest of the cities and the rest of the states and the rest of the Americans. We're talking less than 1% of the city of Tampa thinks that strawberries should be vegetables. And I don't know, they probably got the polling, probably went to the Turn Strawberries into Vegetables rally and polled 2,000 people there, which probably the only 2,000 people there. So anyway, media literacy. Again, the podcast episode came out 6 weeks after the mini camp. He still had 2 weeks, if my math is correct, till training camp. Leonard Fournette showed up to camp, fit Fournette, limber Lenny is in Tampa, Florida. So hopefully we've put this thing to bed and it will never rise again. Locked On Bucs will rise again. We will do so tomorrow. In the meantime, we thank you for making us your first listen or your first view every single day. Now make your second listen or review the Locked On NFL podcast. Our national NFL experts and insiders keep fans dialed in with the biggest stories and the latest news from around the league. If you want to hear my rant on Kyler Murray, go back to Locked On NFL's Tuesday episode. You'll hear me and Luke Braun. Pretty much the entire second segment is just my ranting about Kyler Murray and the ridiculousness there. If you don't care about Kyler Murray, but you care about the Bucs, come back here. James and I will be back to wrap up the week tomorrow. If you got reactions to today's topics, any other topics, if you want to add some questions, subjects, topics for discussion, we do have a voicemail that we need to get to. We will do that on our Friday episode. Continue to send those in to 813-444-5841 or email us if you're shy at lockedonbucspodcast@gmail.com. If you're overseas, voice memo, download it, email it as an attachment. You can still be on the show. For James Yarcho, I'm David Harris. Until we speak again, make sure you're checking out everything we're writing over at bucksnation.com and at bucksgameday.com, and find us on Twitter. I am at dharrison82. James is at jarco_bucks, and the show is at Locked On Bucs. If you're on about, please be safe, be kind to one another, wash your hands, fire the cannons, and thank you for joining us right here at Locked On Bucs.